Hi, everybody. Hi, Hem. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited that we're here at our fireside chat between me and Hemory Phifer called What Does Skills-Based Learning Mean for Career Pathways? So I'm really excited to talk today with you, Hemory, about your journey with your own career and then also how you have helped other folks with their careers through skills-based learning. So let's jump right into it. As I mentioned, my name is Patti Wheeler. I work here at Accredible. I love it. Prior to working at Accredible, I worked for a coding bootcamp in Detroit, which was the second place that I interacted with him. So, Hemory, can you give us just a quick overview? Don't jump all the way into your life right now, but tell us, what you do now for work, and then we'll get into how you got there.
Yeah, for sure. So currently I work for GitHub as a program manager for learning and development, supporting our 400 person product org.
Great. That's awesome. And GitHub, I am not a developer, but I know GitHub intimately, having worked for a coding bootcamp, because I know it's such an essential part in any coder's journey to get to work with GitHub. And so when I saw that you were working there, I got really excited because it feels like it's like the goal, right? You started knowing nothing about coding and now you work at GitHub, which is the resource that we always shared at the bootcamp for people to learn how to become better developers. So it felt like a great full circle thing for me to learn. So let's jump into how you got into this whole thing. So I hinted a little bit that you went to a coding boot camp. How did you learn about this, and how did it come up that what were you doing before you jumped into tech?
Yeah, so before I got into tech, I had a world of experience in many other jobs, as we all do before we, find our final career. But immediately at the time, I was working as a leasing consultant at a high rise in downtown Detroit. And, a part of that job was to tour individuals to look at, some of our units. And I had this conversation with this woman in the elevator who was touring one of our units. And I had, in my head, I had this sort of stereotype of what a developer looked like. And she told me, through conversation, that she was a software engineer. And I was like, well, I mean, you don't really give off the software engineer vibes. But anyhow, how'd you get into that field? And she told me that she went through this wonderful program called Experience IT, who did their development boot camp through Grand Circus. And I had heard of Grand Circus. I mean, 8 years ago, Grand Circus and like software development boot camps was sort of like, I feel like it was still sort of new. It was still like a new thing, but I knew that it also cost a lot of money and I wasn't really ready to make that investment. But she told me that this experience here was going to be, it had a scholarship, so it was sponsored. You just needed to apply. So immediately after our meeting, I went down to my desk, I got on, and it was the last day to apply. But one of the caveats was, you had to quit your job because it was an 8 hour, unless you had, third shift or, some other job. But for me, it was an 8 hour commitment a day during the time that I was actually working at this current job. And at the time, that was like the most money I've ever made. So this was like a big decision. Do I quit my big boy job to go over here and take this gamble, or do I, continue on this pathway? So I sort of made a promise to myself before I hit submit of like, if I get accepted, then I'm gonna just go for it. And so I did get accepted, and the rest is, as you say, history.
Perfect. I love him that you were in an elevator, asked someone what they did for their job. They did not look like a typical software developer, which I think we all know what we imagine a typical software developer looks like. And then that led you down your career path, which is incredible. Let's talk a little bit about that coding bootcamp. So obviously I'm intimate with their structure. And what I love about these kind of alternative education programs is that they're really all skills based in their learning. So at this boot camp, you learn specific skills to take you into being able to become entry-level software developer, but you also learn soft skills. You learn how to interview, you learn how to craft a resume that sets you apart from other folks. You learn how to take those skills that you had from before. Like you said, you've had a manner of jobs over your adult life that have set you up to be the person that you are today, whether or not those are directly related to software development. You still have items that you can bring into your future. So coding boot camps or other variety of training programs often are skills based, and they center around not just that technical skill, but soft skills as well. So can you tell us a little bit about what you learned? What were you studying when you were in the boot camp? Did you study a specific language? Was it all skills based? And then what did you think you were going to get for a job after this?
Yeah, so the structure at Grand Circus was really cool. A part of the Experience IT program. It was a partnership between some big businesses in downtown Detroit, Rocket Mortgage, Blue Cross Blue Shield, One Magnify. So there's a collective of organizations who support the program. So you were guaranteed after the program to get an interview with one of these companies. But they also helped out with that soft skill side that you were talking about. So, they would come in and tell us what they're looking for and what they wanted their resumes to look like and the skills that they wanted. So they would give us things of that nature with our, sort of the soft skill side. But the main focus of the bootcamp was C#.net. So it was a back-end C# software development bootcamp. And then, our capstone was to build out this full-scale web application using some of those languages that we learned throughout the program.
That's awesome. So you were learning like really practical skills that you were hearing from employers were needed in order to fill the roles that they were looking to fill.
Yeah, I think Grand Circus does a good job at generalizing some of the skills that you really need. So they curate a really focused curriculum on what you need to immediately go to any of these teams and be effective on that team, which I think is a plus in skill-based learning. Because, from college, you don't get those things. There's sort of a wider scope of things that you get within your education, but it's not specific to, you just need to know how to do these things to get and hit the ground running within the position.
Yeah, that's great. So I love that. I always think about boot camps. They're definitely still great places for computer science degrees and people who go into getting their master's or their PhD in computer science. Those roles are hugely important. But for those of us who aren't drawn to a traditional education, taking a program that is skills-based can help you learn what you need to learn, like you said, in a really focused way in order to get these specific roles. So I love that this program that you did, Experience IT, both supported Detroiters who were looking to further their career progression. Because like you said, you were making the most money you had ever made, but it still really wasn't that much money. So you took this risk and you quit your job, which even if you don't have to pay for this training, that's still a huge risk. And right. At the end, you were guaranteed interviews, but not a job. So, and you had this plan to become a software developer when you finished. We know based on what you said, that's not what you do now. So what happened when you finished your program?
Yeah, so it's fun when you finish the program, as you mentioned, not everyone gets, the job. The opportunity is there, but they don't get the job. And so after everyone goes through these rounds of interviews, it's sort of like draft day, right? Like we're all in a chat together and we're waiting on the call. We have the phone next to us. We're waiting on the call. And then when the call comes in, we type in the chat, hey, I got the offer from such and such. So for me, I was fortunate enough to get 3 different offers in 3 different roles. So one was recruiting, one was product management, and one was software development. And going through the program, I'll be honest, like software development and learning software development is hard. It is a difficult thing, probably one of the hardest things I have and still do. But so I had to make another pivotal decision in my career. It's either do I go into product management because in my eyes, it seems sort of easier. Or do I stick with the program and go with software development? And so the rationale that I made to myself was that, you know, these other tech adjacent roles, I have the skills and the talents to sort of get into those. But software development was the goal. And for me, it was the most challenging to get into. So stick with the plan and let's make that happen. So afterwards, I accepted the position at Rocket Mortgage to do software development. And I did that for a couple of years until the next big pivot in my career happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to make sure that it is very clear. Nobody is saying that product management is easy.
Nope, not at all. I work with product managers every day.
Yeah.
Not at all an easy job.
But I understand what you're saying, Hemory, right? Like you went into this training with a specific outcome in mind, and you knew in order for you to feel satisfied in that, you know, and to get the ROI that you were looking for, not just monetarily, but for your career trajectory, that working initially as a developer was an essential part in your stepping stone, right? So like you mentioned, you had the skills now to go into an entry-level job, but you also have a more well-rounded view of how to work in tech that you didn't have before you did this skills-based training. So you mentioned your next step. I want to make sure that we talk about how you decided to give back to Experience IT. So after you landed your role as a software developer at Rocket Mortgage, which is one of these companies that's based in Detroit, but is internationally known, that really puts a lot of they really do a good job of hiring folks who have non-traditional training, which I think is a really great thing. We see that through a lot of big tech companies like Rocket Mortgage, like United Wholesale Mortgage, like Accenture, who believe that skills-based training has very significant value, and that if somebody can make it through a boot camp, they can really learn anything, because it is a grueling time, whether it's 8, 10, 12, 24 weeks, whatever you're doing, however long you're in that program for, you learn not just those basics of coding, but you learn how to thrive under pressure, which is a skill that is very necessary working in any part of the tech industry, right? So after you got this role, what'd you do?
Yeah, so after the role, again, I spent a couple years as a software developer, which was great, and I loved it, and probably still until, you know, the pivotal moment, I probably still would just be in software development. But Experience IT started up another program, and they put out a call for mentors, and I've always said that, you know, someone took a chance on me, so it's only right that I, you know, give back, and so I volunteered to be a mentor. And I remember sitting in the room with all the other mentors. And some of the mentors that were in the room were also my mentors when I went through the program. So I knew their background. They're seasoned, they're, you know, principal and senior level software engineers. And we learned that, you know, it's a restructuring of the program, and they need some facilitators to essentially build out the curriculum, or at least curate the curriculum and run the program. And we sat there for, you know, sort of an uncomfortable amount of time. And I was waiting for someone to raise their hand. And I was like, oh, I'll take the initiative, and maybe that'll have one of these other senior folk raise their hand as well. So I raised my hand, and no one else raised their hand. So it was just me. And they were like, all right, Hemory, you got the job. And I was like, okay. So that was my step into essentially learning and development, was help building out what that program would look like for us and the partnering companies. And through that experience, my company, Rocket Mortgage at the time, we had just begun to kick off a program internally where we were essentially reskilling some of our current employees to be software engineers, taking this whole model and bringing it in-house. And we were kicking off this program, and I had the bug. I was like, I've already been over here. Now I want to come over here. And luckily, one of our executive sponsors, she was on the team that was leading this charge. And so I just approached her and I was like, hey, you kind of know my resume. I did Experience IT. Hey, can I make the move over here and help you out over there? And you speak with your manager, let's make it happen. And we were able to make it happen. And that really like started my career officially as an L&D person within tech.
That's great. I love that you just keep having these experiences where you hear about something and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to try and go for it. And then you jump right into it. That is definitely lines up with the Hem that I know. And so I think that's great that you were able to use this this reskilling program that was outside of any particular company to get a job within a company where then you could show that you can use this reskilling program within the org, that you already have a base of talent who are looking to continue to advance their careers. And the way to do that often is with reskilling and to have specific skills-based training, because again, like we're talking about, a 4-year degree with 2 years after isn't always the right move for everybody. So
Right.
yeah. So before we talk about, we have 2 more points I want to hit with why you shifted to GitHub and DevU. Let's talk about specifically why do you think that skills-based learning matters? Like why is this important at all, right? Like you've been a product of it and you're teaching other people how to advance their careers through skills-based learning. So why does that matter?
I mean, it boils down to it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like someone came up with these ideas of, we can sort of take out the fluff of the content and boil it down to something that's really potent and effective. And I think a lot of the skill-based training, I think that's what it gives. It also gives a thing that's really important to me is this idea of access and opportunity. I wanted to be growing up, I wanted to be an engineer, but once I got to college and realized how much math you have to take to be an engineer, I was like, no, that's not for me. I can't do this. So I shifted my focus. And so then that sort of closes a door to me. But discovering Grand Circus and discovering these other skill-based training options that we now have, now you have the access and the opportunity to get into these things and learn something that's really applicable and effective. And you can take those skills and they're transferable. But you take those skills and you get a role in whatever it is, whether it's the position that you exactly want it or something adjacent to it, and it jumpstarts your career and literally makes it, changes your life. I heard going through Grand Circus, a lot of people would come in and they would say, this was literally life changing. And it's like, okay, you keep saying that, but like, what's the stick? Like, what's life changing about this? And it's the fact that you do have this new like access and opportunity, and it teaches or it flexes this muscle of resourcefulness, right? It makes you resourceful. So now you know that all I need is about 12 weeks and I can probably make a pivot into something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you were just talking about how there's, access and opportunity with skills-based trainings, right? Like Detroit is a majority Black city. It's a city with a really high poverty rate. A lot of resources have moved outside of the city, and we're not alone in that, right? Where opportunity left the people who had made their lives in Detroit, and not just the coding bootcamp that we're talking about, but there's so many other skills-based training opportunities, like with construction jobs, in industries that aren't just tech, that are happening in the city of Detroit that really allow people who wouldn't necessarily have the same time or money resources or be able to take 4 years to complete a training to better their life. They need to be able to do something now, and skills-based trainings really provide that opportunity. And so I appreciate that was true for you as well, right? Like you had a job that was pretty good, the best one you'd ever had, but you could still see where the ceiling was at that role, and that wasn't going to fit what you were hoping to be able to provide. So after you became settled in, you were the experience training lead, you made this shift into L&D with workforce development, upskilling and reskilling within your role at Rocket Mortgage. And then you did something pretty cool after that. So you wanted to be the voice for how skills-based learning can change your life. So what'd you do?
Yeah. So we realized my best friend and I, who both come from, similar backgrounds. We've been best friends for over 20 years. He's also in the tech industry. We realized that there's this gap, even still with all these options of skill-based training cohorts and, experienced ITs and Grand Circuses, there's still a gap. There's still people out there who want to get this access and opportunity. And so, we co-founded DevU, which is essentially a foundational skill-based training in the technical aspect company where we just give away free classes and free courses. Actually, last Saturday we started our 10th cohort, and the big thing for us was that we came in this with two visions. One, we need an excuse to spend more time together because adult life just doesn't give you that time, so it's a great excuse. And two, we both share a passion of just wanting to give back to the community, and again, this whole idea of like paying it forward. And so yeah, we've been running this for the last 3 years, and we've trained over 150 200 individuals in various languages: Python, C Sharp, Java, HTML, CSS. And we've seen some real cool progress throughout for them, right? Like some cool opportunities open up and some real cool progress for them. So it's really been not only a passion project, but I think it's just like, it's our calling, and we love just giving back.
That's great. So Hemory, you're offering free entry level coding classes to people who apply to be in your cohort.
Yes.
And aside from just training them in those entry level, foundational skills, you're also providing them with something that's super valuable, which is that you're offering them to be a consultant and a mentor for them to be able to move beyond DevU into whatever their next step of skills-based training might be, so that they can really see you can help them determine and see what different career pathways are out there for them, because you've moved through several yourself based in the training that you received.
Right. And I think that's our draw, right? Like him and I both, I mean, we have at this point probably 8 or 9 years in the industry, and we've been able to, start in non-traditional routes and sort of traverse. I mean, he's at Microsoft, I'm at GitHub, like traverse into these like meccas of the industry, if you will. And so I think, yeah, being able to bring that experience into the classroom. And I think we have a good talent at like just breaking it down so that anyone can understand what we're talking about and be real with people. I know some classes, especially the one that I went through, sometimes it can get like too technical, and it's like, that's too over my head. Like, talk to me like a human, like just talk to me as if I'm here with you. And so yeah, I think though being able to offer that mentorship for us is what gives us the real like community connection and community aspect of the program, because you can get technical training almost anywhere, right? There's online classes, there's YouTube, there's all these things, but having that voice of the people and someone who's actually gone through it to sort of walk side by side with you, I think is really important.
You know how valuable I believe sharing our personal stories is. I think that we learn so much from hearing the successes, and and it's not always just straight uphill, like easy climb to where you want to get, right? There's
For sure.
backslides that happen. I know you had another job in there that you ended up going back to your original company because it was a better fit, right? Like those things happen, but that doesn't mean that you lose sight of what your career path can be, and that you're able to have those kind of visions for other folks is great. And I love that you pointed out that you and your best friend both went through a skills-based training program, non-traditional learning, and now you're at Microsoft and GitHub, which are really incredible organizations. So let's talk about why you moved to GitHub. And like how are you able to get in there? Because that's kind of, like you said, a pretty like gold standard place to be. So why'd you move to GitHub? How'd you get in there? And what's it like?
So I'm always on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn, whether I'm seeking positions or just, just developing content. And so it came across my feed on LinkedIn that, there was this position, learning development. It's sort of my jam after reading, the requirements. And so honestly, it was a hope. It was just like, let me just put my name in the hat. But I think what really helped me stand out for GitHub was the fact that, a part of not only going through skill-based training, but a part of that is being able to self-promote and how you self-promote. And one thing I like really appreciate about Accredible is that, you all give that sort of accreditation, that credibleness, right? To a person who's gone through a boot camp. I could see on their social that like you have this skill, you have a badge. And I think things like that is important when you're looking for or applying and trying to get into, especially a company like GitHub. And what I think is really cool about that is that when I spoke with my hiring manager in the interview process, he mentioned my LinkedIn. He said, I've checked out your LinkedIn. I see the content. I see, how you're always active, and the things that you bring there is what we need over here. So it sort of spoke for me before I even got to the interview, which I thought was really cool. And I really think that gave me the edge over the competition to get me into GitHub.
Thanks for talking about the importance of LinkedIn and the hiring process. It's like, I remember, I am of the age that I am. I went to college a long while ago. And so when LinkedIn first started gaining steam, I was like, oh my gosh, another thing I have to learn. But it has been so helpful. And we see this at Accredible with our customers. When somebody shares their digital credential on their LinkedIn feed, when they add it to their profile, it really makes such an impact in being able to highlight really what your well-rounded skills are. So it's not just like you're saying you know how to do this. They can verify that you actually know what you're saying. And hiring managers are looking at LinkedIn all the time. That's what they do. So if you're already showing that off, then it can work like it did for you, Hem, and you can be set up for success without even knowing that you were doing it. You're just being yourself, and you're using your profile to leverage what you've learned and how you've learned it, whether or not that's through, for your university or a 12-week training. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have 1 minute left. If
Yes.
there's anything that you want to leave people with here about how, like, what's your nugget about how skills-based learning has shot your career forward, and how can people use that for themselves? Just in like 15 seconds, right? No big deal.
15 seconds. All right. I think in our day and time, transitioning to new careers is just a thing. Like, it's a new trend, if you will. And I think skill-based training gives us the ability to make that happen quickly. Because if without it, then like you said, it's a 4-year degree and we just don't have time to do that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hemory. I really appreciate you coming today, Hemory. And thanks to everybody who joined us for our conversations today.